Well, as we slowly transition to the back-to-school routine, it is important to talk about diversity in classrooms. According to a national survey, 58% of Canadian youth say they have seen kids insulted, bullied, or excluded based on their race, or ethnicity at school. 14% say they are experiencing it themselves, with visible minority children 3 times as likely and Indigenous children twice as likely. So here to make our classrooms better, to make them more inclusive and equitable, is Salam Debs, who is an anti-racism coach. It's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me back.
So you've come up with this guide called 9 Ways You Are Perpetrating Racism Towards Children and How to Do Better. I love this. It is straightforward. It is direct and to the point. This was inspired by your son's own experience in his school. So do you mind sharing what happened and how this influenced your work?
Absolutely. So I created this free PDF guide, which is available on my website on salamdebs.com. Because of my experiences as a Black mother, raising a Black boy in a predominantly white school environment. And one great example was when my son came to me one day at the age of 4 and he said, "Mommy, I wish that you had called me Zach instead of called him, his ethnic or cultural name. Or Mommy, I wish that my hair was straight rather than having, his Afrocentric and textured hair." And what I realized at that time is that I did not teach my son to believe these things about himself, but rather that this was the socialization and conditioning in a society of that, biased messaging, and I became aware of that.
All we want to do as moms is protect our kids, but you're sending him out into a world that isn't necessarily protecting him. And that's hard, but we're going to change that. We're going to talk about the common ways that parents and teachers or caregivers are unknowingly or knowingly perpetrating racism towards children. What are these?
Absolutely. So the first example would be hypervisibility, which is the ways in which Black and brown children, and disproportionately Black children, are overly disciplined or experience, severe consequences, more severe consequences than their, non-Black and non-racialized peers. The second example would be lack of representation in curriculum. So when children don't see their identities and their experiences included in their daily learning and in their educators. And the last example is color blindness, which is the myth that children don't see race and that therefore we shouldn't talk about, racial bias. And often then what happens is that racial harm ends up being minimized. And one really great thing for us to understand is that racial bias actually shapes and impacts children daily. A great example of this is the doll test study, which is where they placed dolls of different races in front of children of different races. And then they asked the children to reach for the doll that was beautiful, that was smart, that was good. And they found in the results that the majority of children, regardless of race, would associate negative, qualities or attributes to Black and brown, dolls, and then positive attributes to the white dolls.
So how does all of this then impact the mental health of a child who's being impacted by this?
Yeah, absolutely. So hypervisibility, for example, it impacts, it leads to lower expectations. So Black and brown children then feel targeted, they feel isolated, they feel othered, which leads to the school to prison pipeline. We also see that with lack of representation in curriculum, it leads to lower self-esteem. It leads to feeling othered. It leads to feeling internalized racism. And it prevents Black and brown children from striving for those job opportunities or careers where they don't see themselves represented. And colorblindness, the myth of colorblindness, what it does is it minimizes the racial harm that children face.
What I'm hearing from you as you're saying all of this is that we need to be very intentional and make choices about how we are going to make this better. You can't just hope it's going to go away. You have to make these choices. So what are some of the ways that educators and all of us can create a more inclusive and anti-racism environment in these classrooms?
Yeah, absolutely. We need action. So first solution would be that we need to upgrade and transform the curriculum to empower Black, Indigenous, and racialized youth to see themselves represented beyond beyond just Black History Month and the national, Indigenous months, we also need to invest in training. So training for all staff at all levels in anti-racism and equity. And finally, we need to create environments of belonging that affirm children's experiences of, racism and inequities. And we need to give children the gift of truth rather than trying to protect them, right, from the realities of society. And that helps us to raise children that are more compassionate, more empathetic, and better human beings in the world.
I love every single time you come on the show. You are making the world a better place, and you're teaching all of us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.